Hi, this is Gary with MACMOST.com. Let's look at the incredibly useful indirect function in numbers. MACMOST is brought to you thanks to a great group of supporters. Go to MACMOST.com/Patreon. There you could read more about it, join us, and get exclusive content. So you can accomplish a lot in a numbers spreadsheet using something like the Lookup function. But the indirect function can actually be more powerful, and you could do some really clever things with it. So here's the basic way that indirect works. Say I want to get the value of apples at the central store, which is 60 cents. I could go into a cell here, type the equals key to enter formula mode, and I could type C2 and hit return. It's going to convert that to central apples because that's the name of the row and column, and it'll give me that value. I could also just have typed equals and then clicked here, and I get that. I could use indirect to get that in an indirect way. So I'll enter a formula and do indirect as the function and parenthesis, and then I can do in quotes something like C2. And then I also get that same value. So it's basically saying, okay, do an indirect lookup of this string, this piece of text here, C2. What's the value of C2? Okay. Now, that may not seem like it's an improvement over this. This seems a lot easier. But now you could do things like this. You could say indirect and say give me the indirect value of whatever the value in this cell is, B10. And I close it and I get an error because B10 is empty. But if I enter the text C2 into B10, I get that 60 cents because it's saying indirect lookup of the value of B10, which is C2, and it looks up that value. If I change this to, say, C3, you can see it goes and says 65 cents now because it's looking up central oranges. So you can use indirect to grab a value from one place and then find the value based on the first value there. You could do that in another table as well. You just need to add the table name. So I could right here say indirect, and then in quotes I could say prices, since that's the name of this table here, 2 colons, and then I could say C2. And will get me that value. Now things get really interesting when you start to use row and column names instead of labels like C2. So for instance I can do indirect, and instead of C2 I can simply say, okay, central apples, and it'll give me the value. I could do the same thing here. And I could say, okay, prices, central apples. And it will look it up. As a matter of fact, it's even smarter than that because I don't need to include the name of the table. I can just say central apples. Why does that work? Well, number says, well, central and apples only applies to this table. So it must be from this table where that value is needed. So I don't have to do anything special like provide the table name to reference that value in another place. Now I can go even further than that and do something like this. Let me add another column here and let's say central and apples are the values in these cells, and I can do indirect and say, okay, central, and then use an ampersand and then a quote, a space, and another quote to insert a space between that and the value for this. And now it's going to put together central and then space and then apples and get the indirect lookup of that, and I get 60 cents. The cool thing about that is I could change this. I could say west, and you can see that value updates. I can say grapes, and the value updates again. So it's going to look up whatever values are here inside of this indirect. One cool thing about the indirect function is you can so easily change the table reference in addition to changing the row or column reference. So for instance, here we have 2 different tables that represent possible costs and prices for products. And then we want to calculate basically the profit based on one of those 2 tables. So we have a sale here of apples, 50 of them. What's the cost of that going to be using the current pricing? Well, we can use indirect to look that up. So we could start with quote and then current for the name of the table with 2 colons. And then we'll add to that the name of the product here. So apples. And then we'll add to that a space and cost. And from that we get 60 cents. Now we want to multiply that by the amount, so I'll add that here at the end. Times, and then we'll do the amount. So that's the total there. We can do the same thing for the sale price, except we're going to use price instead of cost. So we could do indirect and then current colon an ampersand and then the value there and then ampersand quote space price and close that off, and we don't need the extra parameter there. We multiply that by the amount and we get the sale. Profit is then sale price minus the cost. So what if we wanted to do that but instead of current, proposed, right? So I can go into here and I could change current to proposed, and now it's the proposed cost, and I can change this one to proposed as well. But we don't want to have to change each one of those each time, and then if we have a whole bunch of rows here we have to change for everything. So instead let's create another table here with just one cell in it. So this will be a really simple table. I like using one cell tables a lot for things just like this. So we'll call this one, which type, whatever you want to call it, and the value here will be something like current. Okay. Now we can take that value here and substitute it in here. So I'm going to take away everything but leave the 2 colons there, and before it I'm going to put the value of this and then an ampersand. So the which type, A1, and then it's going to add 2 colons and then continue as before. I'm going to make sure that this is set to be an absolute value. So no matter where I paste this it's always going to refer to that one cell. I'll do the same thing for here. I'll take away proposed and add a reference to this cell and make it absolute. Now the cool thing is if I go and I change the value of this from current to proposed, it changes that. And I can have 50 rows here of different sales and it would change for all of them. So I could switch between the current prices and the proposed prices really easily. Matter of fact, I can make this a pop-up menu with proposed and current as the 2 values, and now I can switch between them very easily to see the changes here. Add a little total there at the bottom and I can see how, say, a month's worth of sales would be affected by changing from the current pricing to the proposed pricing. So one last tip I want to show you is you don't even need to have a column name if you only have one column in the table. So for instance I will go and delete all of this here and shrink this table down. I will even get rid of this header row here. And basically what I have here is a quick lookup table of prices. And then I could go in here and do indirects to look up a price. So indirect and then just say apples. And we'll find it because it knows that the only table that has apples in it as a header is here, and there's only one value it could possibly be. So I could in fact go and say something like apples and then indirect and then take the value from this and it will look it up. So then I could change this to oranges and it will look it up. So you can do it even simpler if you have a quick lookup table like this with indirect. You could also refer to different sheets as well. So here's sheet 1 as before and I've got a prices table and a price for apples. I've got sheet 3 and there's also a prices table and a different price for apples. So in sheet 4 you see if I just were to type equals and then go over to sheet 1 and say click on the cell here, it gives me what it should look like. So sheet 1 and then 2 colons, prices, 2 colons, and then East apples. So I could do the same thing with indirect. I can do indirect and then in here go sheet 1 colon colon prices colon colon East apples and get a value. But if I changed it to sheet 3 then I get a different value. And of course you can change these sheet names. So I can change this to future, for instance. So in here now I'd have to change from sheet 3 to future. So you could do all three. You can refer to sheets, you can refer to tables, and then you can refer to individual cells inside of a table. So as you can see there's a ton of power inside of the indirect function. If you want to take your spreadsheets to the next level, practice using the indirect function and see what you can do and how you can apply it to your projects. I publish new tutorials every weekday. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss out. Then hit the little bell icon to get notifications for each new tutorial.